Welcome to my podcast, The Government Mechanic. I am your host, Dr. Lynn Sandra Khan, and I am the Government Mechanic. And we are continuing with our theme of failures in family law. And today we're going to focus on parental alienation. My special guest today is David Shubert, writer, author, speaker, and expert from personal experience of illegal international parental abduction when his ex-spouse took his children overseas. He has been writing about these issues for more than 50 years, and I'm just going to let him tell his story. It's so powerful, as well as what he's learned over that time. David Shubert, tell us what happened to you and your family.
Well, it's kind of a mixture of different stories because I know that at one point I had been married to a woman and she had a son of her own. He was a toddler at the time, and we would later on bring a child of our own between us. So I had my stepson, I had my own daughter, and in June of 2017, or I'm sorry, 2007, my ex-wife, we were married at the time, she abducted the children and went overseas. I wound up having to go through the family courts, and it took 3 years for them to bring the children back.
Wow.
Well, actually, no, 2 years. My mistake on that one. But the judge in the case, he'd ruled against me and allowed the mother to keep them simply based upon, well, they've been gone for so long, so it's in the children's best interest. Well, when the judge said that, needless to say, I was floored. The people at the
Yeah.
State Department was floored. The people at the Hague Convention was floored. And everyone else, they couldn't believe that a judge had actually, with all the mounting evidence, including the abduction internationally and the threat of never coming back in disobedience of the court orders to bring them back, couldn't believe that that the judge would rule in such a manner. And needless to say, I knew when it happened, the alienation was going to occur. And I was right. From that moment on, I would have no contact with either child for the next, from then on, from 2000 and,
Seven.
2009 until 2017, or I take that back, not 2017. I have to think back. It's been so long ago. 2000 and about 22. I had no contact. My daughter wound up finding me on social media because of all my writings that I constantly do. And it was kind of like breadcrumbs. But to this day, I'm still angry at that judge and I'm angry at the system because this is something there that should never have happened. The abduction should have been resolved right away instead of taking 2 years. So I blame kind of the international courts for that. But once they were back, the judge's hand should have been tied. He shouldn't have been able to rule in the way he did. Instead, he was able to bring his own personal biases and lack of knowledge and, well, I hate to say it, but stupidity into the picture. And it devastated the entire family, me and my children. And
Yeah.
it's fallout. We're still suffering.
It's like he was rewarding bad behavior.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
he is. And
So you're making a distinction between what one spouse actually does with the children and to the other spouse, and then what happens in court, and then the whole alienation process as you have no contact with your children, and they probably aren't hearing the best stories about you.
oh, no, you can bet on that. I mean, that's the alienator's favorite tactic, divide and conquer. They're going to make up excuses. They're going to try to deflect blame. They're going to reinvent the history of the
Yeah.
love that a parent had for their child, the fun things they did. They're going to try to implant false memories. They're going to talk bad about you, everything they can to turn that child away from the normally loving parent. And I'm no different. I know that even though I wasn't in the room when it happened, obviously 8,000 miles away, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that's what happened. Sad
And
part is
how have you
one
go
else.
ahead, I'm sorry.
Sad part is it happens to millions of others
Yes, you've been learning about that, right? Have people contact you about their situation?
every day.
Is it
Every day, ever since I got on social media in 2016, I'm in contact with parents all over the world.
wow. Is it mostly fathers or mothers or evenly split?
No, I know that depending on who you talk to, they always say, well, no, it's got to be the fathers who are alienated more. But, I have a significant amount of mothers who are actually going through this same process.
Mm,
So you have to understand about alienation. Usually, not always, but most alienators have an underlying mental health issue. And it could be narcissism, it could be bipolar, it could be whatever is wrong with them.
yeah,
And you know that. You've worked in
yep,
psychology for a long time.
yep.
So it doesn't mean that just because you have it that you're necessarily a man or you're a woman.
Mhm.
So therefore, I have a lot of women that are alienated from their children, the same as the men. But again, depending on the group you talk to, oh, it's got to be the men that are the victim
Yeah.
parents,
Mm.
or the women say, no, it's got to be the women that are the victims. No, the real victim is our children.
Yes, yes, yes. So, what advice do you have for parents who find themselves in this situation? What advice do you give?
As far as the alienation or abduction,
Both.
well, when it comes to the abduction, if you suspect it, and here's the problem, is that parental abduction, believe it or not, those occur more often. Stranger abductions actually only occur 3% of the time. Most abductions for children occur within the family or from someone
Wow.
they actually know. So usually it's a parental abduction. Now, if you're married to someone from another country, as an example, like I was, even though you might think that your marriage is going along, you better have a backup because something could happen. You don't know what's going on with these people because they wear a mask of deception on their face. And it's only at a
Mm,
certain point that that mask is slowly lowered and they reveal themselves for who they are. And in a moment's time, what could happen, just like it did with me, they're gone. Your children, they disappeared. I remember the first 2 weeks after it happened, I wandered my neighborhood for 2 solid weeks. And I had this thought in my mind that even though I knew they were gone, that it had to be a game. I kept
mm,
peeking around corners and behind bushes, thinking it's a game of hide and seek. Up here, they're going to jump out and say, "Hey, Dad, gotcha." It didn't work out that way. So
mm.
what I tell people now is that if you're married to someone that is, especially from overseas, make sure that you have copies of all of their hospital records, you have their copies of their birth certificates, you have copies of their passports, you have everything set aside, including recent photos. Because if it happens, you want to go to the authorities. Now, don't make the same mistake that I did and trust that these guys on the local level are going to do their jobs because most times they don't have any idea what this is. Because I
Mm.
remember with me, when it happened, when I first found out, and they were in Denver International Airport, I called up the local sheriff's department. They come over, and I said, "Get over there and stop them. Get them before they can leave the country." You know what the cop told me? We can't do nothing. They have, they have rights in this country, and if we find her, if we get lucky enough, they can say, "Well, you know what? I'm taking my children on holiday, and there's nothing you can do. It's my
Mm.
constitutional right." And you know what? She's right. Guess what? It would take me 6 months before I'd find out they were wrong because I was also a parent. I had equal right,
Ah,
and therefore she was violating my rights as a equal custody parent. They could have stopped her. They didn't because they had
oh.
no training, no knowledge, excuse me, and know anything about this. So it's very important that you keep copies of all these records, safeguarded so that the other person doesn't ever know you have them and destroy them in the process of leaving. You hope that it never does, but let's face it, Everyone thinks, that'll never happen to me. It'll happen to that other guy over there.
Yeah.
That's what I always thought too until that happened to me. So
And I
anyway,
think what you're also saying, you're gonna have to advocate for yourself. You should know your rights as a parent.
yes, because if you go to the cops and stuff, you need to be, and they tell you there's nothing we can do. Want to bet? The law says, and every state
Mm,
has that same law. It just might be worded differently. And guess what? You tell them you are going to do your job. And here is the law for my state that is also covered under federal law and everything else. Because if they go across state lines, it goes into federal law. If they go across international borders, it's federal law. But if they go across town or into another city in that state, okay, it's state. But the language pretty much mirrors itself. It's just worded a little bit differently.
hmm. So know your rights, and you're gonna have to advocate for yourself, it sounds like.
And don't delay.
Mm,
Because once you find out that the child has been abducted, take immediate action. Get a hold of the authorities. Demand your rights as a parent to get those children back. Don't sugarcoat it and think, well, you know what, I'll talk nice to them and they'll come back and they'll play nice with me. Uh-huh. I see how that worked with me. It took me a couple of years before they told her, you either bring the children back as per our orders of the Hague Convention, or we're going to put you in jail and we're going to let the father come and get them. Well, the threat
mm.
of jail was the only thing that woke them up. So you can't play nice with these people. You really can't. You've got to fight fire with fire, and you've got to be just as strong and hard as what they are. Otherwise, you are going to take a chance of being in the same position with I am. You're going to miss out on all the important moments of your children's life. Memories that should have been created, they're out the window. You can
Yeah,
never get that back. But as far as the alienation that occurred afterwards, that's something there that is equally devastating,
yeah,
and what I tell parents that, okay, they're depending on the length of time that it's gone through, the severity of it and everything else, it might take possibly weeks, it could take months, it could take years, it could take a lifetime before the child wakes up and realizes that what they've been taught about the other parent is not correct, that they've been being fed malicious lies in order to be turned away from the parent who really loves them. Because they're, let's face it, the children are being used as nothing more
yeah.
than a tool of destruction to hurt the other parent for an act of revenge for a failed relationship. And that's not right. Some children
No.
come to that realization at some point in their life, others never will.
I'm
But
so sorry. I hope your children do come to that realization.
well,
I wonder. Go ahead.
here's the thing about it is that you can't push it, you can't rush it.
Yeah,
You can only be there and kind of like drop little breadcrumbs along the way, reminding them that you're still mom or you're still dad, that you still love them, and that you're always going to be there for them. And eventually, even though we get impatient and we want immediate gratification, you can't rush it. Otherwise, it'll drive the children further away. So my
yep,
thing is just do what you're supposed to be doing.
yep, yep. I wanted to ask you what changes you would like to see in policy or law at either the federal or a state level. Are there changes that you've thought about would have helped your situation?
Yeah, and I've advocated for this for years. That here's the thing: when you go into a hotly contested divorce or child custody hearing, family judges, they're really not educated in the way they are. Now, I know some states, like California as an example, they have to take, I think it's 2 weeks training that talk about high conflict divorce and child
Mm,
custody. But they don't stress enough about parental alienation. And
mm,
that in itself, some states, they actually are classifying alienation as child abuse. And they can and they can actually prosecute these people when found guilty of that, but they think it's a hot potato and they don't want to address it. They need to start enforcing their own laws. And these judges, they need to get more training. But the other
Yeah.
thing about it is that with judges, let's face it, they're human. I mean, they put their pants on the same way as the rest of us do. They've got their biases and their own idiosyncrasies and everything else like that, as an example. And I use this analogy many times that let's take a judge. They wake up in the morning, they're ready to get to work, and they step out of their front door. They head for their car, and the neighbor's dog, who's owned by, and I'm going to use this strictly as an example, but the neighbor's dog is owned by a woman, runs up to the judge, pees on his leg, and now he's going to be late because he's got to go change pants. He gets in there and he's mad at all women. So he's going to take it out on them, and he's going to rule in the men's favor, and vice versa. Okay. My thought is this: to take that human element out of it as far as a singular judge, we need to go ahead and establish it to where if it's requested, that they can have just like a jury trial, a jury court for crimes, that they have a
Mm.
jury. So the six people or five people or whoever can listen to the evidence. And there is no bias in there. They're just listening to straight evidence. So that, as an example, if evidence is introduced, it's not because in family court, and you probably know this, he who lies first is believed without benefit of proof, right? And that actually is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And so I think if you introduce evidence, you have to back it up. But at the same time, let the jury decide on that evidence which parent is better for the best interests of the children. Instead, we've got judges who got the dog that peed on their leg that morning, going to rule in a way, and then they're going to put it on paper that says, in the best interest of children. And let's face it, most times those are nothing more than hollow words meant to take up filler space. So yes, that is one thing that would stop, actually, two things that would stop alienation a lot. Enforce your own laws and classify in all 50 states that alienation is child abuse. And the ones that do have that on the books, start enforcing it. But the other thing is bring juries into the family courts to decide instead of letting a lone judge do it for you.
Great ideas. Great ideas. Anything else that you want? Your writings are amazing. I would suggest that we have a list of your publications and your website. Your YouTube channel is called A Parenting Affair, and your writing is it's beautiful. It's so powerful, and it conveys both the pain but also your strength, and it's very graceful and kind of reassuring. I really would suggest people read if you're in this situation, especially. They will find support in the words that you have written. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, it's all I can say to the parents that are going through parental alienation. Just take your time. I know that you're very impatient, that you want to hold your children again, but you have to understand they've gone through a lot and they don't know who to believe. They're constantly being bombarded from one side, and that's the parent who is in charge of them right now, that's putting food on their table, a roof over their head, and taking them to do different things. They depend upon them and they don't want to jeopardize that. So they're going to
Yeah.
believe this stuff. It's going to take time for them to process and unwind and unravel all this stuff. So I just say have patience. Just drop them a little note once in a while if you can that says, "Hey, I love you. I'm thinking about you. And by the way, happy birthday or Merry Christmas. Hopefully we can get together when you're ready and you have time. Let's talk on the phone or get together at the park, whatever. Don't push them. Don't rush it. Just take your time with them, and then many times it'll work out in the best way."
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, David Shubert. We've been talking about parental alienation. We're going to put your books and LinkedIn social media information in the show notes for this video and on podcast channels. And thank you. Thank you. It's been hard to listen to. It's so painful, parts of it. But at the same time, there's a lot of strength and wisdom that you've gotten to. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Lynn. It was great to talk to you, and I hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.